I've got on stage with me a couple of really interesting folks, but first I wanted to start off and say thanks to Vuforia for sponsoring the session, pulling this together, and connecting me with this couple of great guys from AR+VR. First, I just wanted to start off with just a brief introduction myself, and then we'll kind of get into the discussion. I'm a technology analyst at Gartner. My title is Research Vice President in Personal Technologies. And I mainly look at the AR and VR business. It's an area that I've been in for a very long time. I got my start in the late 1980s when I was in grad school at the University of Central Florida. And I worked in the VR and immersive industry for quite a number of years before I became an analyst. So I've got a lot of exposure. I've been to this event many times and all of the previous events that have focused on AR/VR over the past 20 plus years. Besides AR/VR at Gartner, I cover topics that are mainly consumer-oriented. I look at the video game market. We look at mobile apps in my group. We look at connected home, virtual personal assistants. And the last thing you should know about me and my job at Gartner is I'm the designated lead analyst for Apple. So I take care of all of the Apple research at Gartner. But my favorite topic, the one I know the best, is the one that we're going to be discussing today. So very honored to have Jay Wright and Tony Parisi here. Just a brief introduction. Jay Wright is the president of Euphoria at PTC. Jay is a veteran of the industry. Jay helped spearhead the Vuforia products and technology while they were at Qualcomm. I don't remember the year you got started, but it's been quite a number of years now. Qualcomm sold the business, the Vuforia business, to PTC about a year and a half ago. And Jay's been running it since, and they've got a great product and one that I think you should pay attention to. And to be honest, one we're going to talk about here, we've got a few things to go over because I'm excited about what PTC and Vuforia are doing to enable enterprise and commercial use of immersive technology. Tony Parisi is head of AR/VR strategy at Unity. If you're not familiar with Unity, it's a game engine technology, but today it's being used for many other types of use cases and a lot of other types of businesses. There's a special connection that I have to Tony. I was in business with Tony, VR business, starting in around 1994, 1995. It was in the early days of the web. And once the web was invented, of course, all of us smart 3D guys said, hey, it needs VR. And we went off and did it. And of course, we were a little too early. But that said, Tony and I have a long history together. We're going to muse about it a little bit. But I want to say thanks for coming up here. Thanks for being here. The first question that I have, it's going to go to Jay. I really want to discuss what you guys announced this week and recently with your partnership with Unity. I'm really curious about the news. I want to bring up this topic of the Project Chalk, which is a cool new app and technology that you've got. So maybe you can just sort of just give us an introduction about Vuforia technology that you've been announcing.
Yeah, sure. So maybe just to start from a broad level, we solve one of the critical problems in the AR technology stack, which is the ability to see objects in the environment so that you can put content into them. And we look at this as a system-level problem, across device and cloud and computer vision and deep learning and traditional processors and new kinds of processors, and try and solve this problem in a cross-platform way. And so we've done that with SDKs that a lot of folks are using today inside their applications. And I think today most AR software that exists is based on Vuforia. So the last 4 months have been pretty busy, maybe 6 months. I think last November, I go back to where we started with the announcement with Unity, we announced taking kind of our partnership to the next level, where Vuforia will be integrated in Unity. So we're going to have a much simpler workflow for creating AR experiences inside of Unity. We're also going to be doing some performance improvements where the two engines will be able to talk closer to each other. It's a non-technical term.
Sure, talking closer together.
We'll talk closer together, and things will be better. So that's one big thing, and we are super excited about that with Unity. And then we did I think a follow-on with Unity also just a couple weeks ago at the Vision Summit, where we showed support for new Google Tango devices and show what happens when you can take content that's attached to certain types of objects and sort of liberate it and let it run around the world. At the show at AWE, 3 new things. First one was a big change for our object recognition technology.
Yep.
The ability to recognize things by shape with Vuforia model targets. Second one was support for a new eyewear device. So we welcomed Vuzix to the Vuforia ecosystem with support for the M300. And then finally, Project Chalk. And that one's a big deal.
Yeah, let's talk about Project Chalk. Can you give a basic description of the Project Chalk app that you're going to release, and then also about how it's being integrated into the Euphoria tech stack?
Yeah, so we think of Project Chalk as a new form of communication that enables remote presence. So it enables 2 people to have interactions when they're far apart that ordinarily would have required them to be together. And specifically interactions where I want to help walk somebody through something.
Yeah.
And so the experience, as you probably had seen, starts kind of similar to a video call. But one person could write on the screen, and the other person sees that writing on top of the world as they're looking at it. And we think this is a really fundamental capability that's something that everybody on the planet can use at some point, from the time they're children till they're older people. And we'll be commercializing this in 2 different forms. 1, as this standalone app, and 2, as a platform-level capability in Vuforia SDKs, so that it can be added to existing apps pretty simply.
So so this basic sort of drawing on your screen in augmented reality for regular people, right? So for you and I, for our parents, our kids, whoever, like where do you see some of the use cases coming out on the consumer side? And it's something sort of non-traditional, I think, for Vuforia directly. You've been enabling that with your partners, but what do you envision as some of the top use cases, and where do you think people are going to get value from it?
I'll tell you, one of the sources of inspiration for this came from, well, I know we were talking about this before, but you guys have all had some flavor of phone call from someone in your family, maybe mom, having trouble with something at home, and the call goes something like this. Jay, yeah, mom, the internet's not working. Like, what, mom, what? Like, what do you mean the internet is not working? Well, the light's not blinking. Like, mom, which light? Well, should I plug the thing back in? I'm like, oh my God, like, what thing are you even talking about? And it's this back and forth frustrating conversation. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the movie. And so what happens, and if I could just see what she sees and reach my little finger through the phone and point it, it would all be over and done. And that's essentially what this is enabling. Yep. Is mom, pick up the phone. Or even mom, I would pay $3,000 for a pair of glasses for her to wear to save me from this frustration. Mom, put on the glasses, and here it is. And maybe it just takes 5 or 10 seconds, and I can do that. Yep. And way less time and way less frustration than otherwise.
I can echo that. I'm the IT support person in my house, and even though none of my family lives anywhere near me, I wind up being the IT support person, including just on this weekend, I went to a relative's house closer to here, and they were like, it's all screwed up, can you help me? Yeah. And they were too embarrassed to call me. They waited till I actually got to the house. So
I think it's also going to be great for, I'm the sometimes over-adventurous do-it-yourselfer. So I'll start with a project and get into something and go, uh-oh.
So it's too much, and then you need the expert help. You got to call the IT support relative.
And I think it starts with friends, like you would do today. If you know someone that knows it. But beyond that, I think this gets used professionally and integrated more by retailers or even product manufacturers. Right? This is how I should get support for the product.
Yeah, very interesting. All right, I'm going to switch over to Tony. Listen, I got to ask Tony a real special question here. Right? I mentioned to you that we have this long history together. We started this business, more than 20 years ago, and we sort of cut our teeth early on VR, and to some degree kind of got burned, if you will. We invested personal time and career into it, and now it's only here today. I get asked a lot of questions by various Gartner clients about what's coming, why it's here today, what happened between. But I'm going to ask the same question of Tony, sort of going back on our history, looking at the things that we were doing, at 181 Fremont Street, which is a building that's no longer there today in San Francisco. What's the difference? What do you see as the difference between sort of that old kind of crude VR that we're doing and what's going on today?
Okay, so first off, back then we'd all read Snow Crash.
Yes.
And if you don't know what that is, that's Ready Player One, written 20 years before that. And we all got really excited about the idea of being able to communicate in 3D and these sort of artificial and user-created worlds. And we started working on technologies to enable that, specifically VRML. We talked about that, doing 3D in a browser. Now, this was 1993 when I got started on this, and I met Brian about a year later, and we got going on our startup a little bit after that. This was a time when people had desktop computers that had processing power measured in megahertz, not gigahertz. That you could do some amount of real-time 3D graphics in using software, but it would work a lot better if you bought a $1,000 card from Creative Labs or 3D Labs and plugged that, open systems, you open the system and you plug the hardware into it and you put this graphics card in, and then maybe you could actually render, say, 20 to 30 frames per second of some pretty crude 3D content. This was trying to do this in web browsers in 1993 when the first web browsers had come online. It was before JavaScript was in a web browser. It was before Sun had released Java, in fact. It came out sort of right around the same time as VRML did. And it was with people connected, so no one knew how to create content for any of this stuff, right? And there were like 5 3D developers in the whole world, and they were all in Central Florida working with Brian, or then at Autodesk, where Brian was just before we started working together. And then finally, everyone was connecting on dial-up modems. Does everyone here in this room know what a dial-up modem is?
Come on.
It goes beep and squawk and squeak and makes the most charming noises. You probably have it as a ringtone on your phone. And they operated at about 9,600 baud, which, today we have megabit connections to do this over the air, right, with mobile. So when you put that all in context, all that infrastructure, all that core technology just wasn't in place then. So that has changed radically in the last 20 years, right? We have supercomputing power in our pockets. We have fast networks. We have all kinds of infrastructure on the web and everywhere else to actually, push the content, deliver apps and all that. We had none of that back then. So just bear that in mind. So infrastructure has changed dramatically in 20 years. And that's one of 3 things that I think are key to this equation. The other 2 are that, and I just touched on it a second ago, we now have millions of people who can create 3D content, thanks to all that's happened in video gaming, in VFX, in design software. We have, kids coming out of school. We have 10-year-old kids using modeling packages, not just my son who's a teenager because he's my son. I mean, people know how to model in 3D now. They didn't before. There's millions of creators worldwide. Like, I think Blender has like 2 million registered users. I mean, you go down the list. There's a lot of people who create in 3D now. But most importantly, and I spoke about this quite a bit yesterday, is we have a whole generation of people now who expect this. They've grown up on video games. This is the consumer side. They've grown up on CG movies. They expect fully interactive content, whether it's mobile and tablet-based or now, VR. I mean, it's not even a question to them. They're excited about it, right? They can't wait to get their hands even on the cardboard stuff. I mean, that's clear. So you put those 3 things together, and the conditions have changed radically, and all that. Everything else that we saw and wrote the movie before. We were talking about all the same application use cases. I don't want to sound like too much of an old curmudgeon, but almost everything you hear about when people talk in these panels about the challenges on design. I mean, some of the world's changed. We have mobility. We didn't have mobile computing in the same way before, but almost all the use cases are the same: design, architecture, engineering, and all that. But all the specifics on how the stack works and everything about the infrastructure is fundamentally different and poised to now enable all this.
So, and also just a bit of history, I'll point out that when we were developing the first internet plugins, if you will, right? Flash and 2D wasn't even a priority. We all thought 3D was in the beginning. So we kind of preceded the 2D
Oh yeah,
animation.
Flash. That was the first arrow in the back, right? That was the real killer. That was like the gunshot, like blew a hole in us. Because that was like rich media, but people didn't have to figure out how to create in 3D. It was just 2D animation, vector graphics.
Yeah.
Like that came about 4 years after what we started, what we were doing.
Yeah, exactly. But also, one thing that hasn't changed, form factor. We still have face mask. We still have this idea of the glasses, right? So maybe that'll stick around. The idea and the promise, I don't think has changed one bit. I think we all get it, right? Now we're all creators, but even before that, we were video game players, we were movie watchers. We sort of understand what computing technology can do. And today, it's in good hands of these technology developers to put it into market, and I think that there's a lot of excitement there and adoption. Another question for Tony, more on what's going on today at Unity. So you guys had a conference, an AR+VR conference not that long ago, 3-4 weeks ago. Can you just review a little bit about what you talked about at the conference and what, talk a little bit about Unity's strategy for AR+VR?
Okay, so I'll pop the stack first. And
Sure.
So been at the company for about 6 months. as we were just talking about, I've been in the field for a long time, and I've known the folks at Unity, the founding team, for a while now, like coming on a decade, and I was always a big fan of the company. And they approached me mid-last year, and we started having discussions about where they wanted to take VR and AR. It became clear that immersive technology was going to be valuable for a lot more than gaming and entertainment, which is in Unity's wheelhouse. And then so they built this great platform for rendering in 3D in real time, for authoring your content very easily, and they've spent a lot of time and energy democratizing the authoring platform around that, plus building a set of services to enable people to monetize, especially in the mobile advertising world. All of that stuff, plus investments and heavy partnerships with the people making the HMD technologies, like Microsoft, like Google, like Oculus, like Samsung, and working really closely with software partners like Vuforia. I mean, we're really in this together as software partners, and in our selfish view, it's really all about the software. The hardware is going to sort itself out. The form factors are going to sort themselves out. So these heavy investments were being made at Unity for a while, thinking it was about gaming and entertainment, or not thinking about the other use cases too much. And to Unity's credit, for a few years before that, a lot of people were trying things just on mobile and flat screens around architecture, design and engineering, and all these other use cases. But the company consciously decided to focus on gaming and mobile for a few years. Well, XR comes along and changes the whole equation. All these industries start coming to us and wanting to work with us on AR toys and these kind of things that are being built in Vuforia on a daily basis, to heavy-duty design using VR to actually design products like cars, like aerospace equipment, like architecture and all that. All these things start happening organically. And people start coming to Unity going, hey, can we get more support? Or can we have different features in the product? And so I came along to help us figure out how we lay out a roadmap that takes us into that future where we're going to start powering more industries beyond gaming and entertainment.
Yep, that's great to hear that you're starting to think about other use cases, especially about enterprise or commercial. There's a lot of opportunity there, no doubt about that. Hey, I want to pop over to Jay. I have a little bit of a history question. So right before we walked in, I was asking Jay about his background before Euphoria, and he said that he got his professional start right here in this very building at an Apple event 20 plus years ago, right? So you've been in this building a lot, so to speak, right? You've seen a lot of change, and specifically with this show, with AWE, but also I know you've been a veteran of SIGGRAPH and other graphic shows. Where have you seen the industry go, even back at the Apple Newton conference that you were at here 20 plus years ago, to where you are today? I just want to sort of get your take on how you're seeing the advancement go and the pace of advancement. I get a lot of questions about pacing, right? So I'm really curious about your view about how it's been advanced over the years.
I think there's this well-documented phenomenon about technology adoption where we kind of over-index on how soon it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen much sooner.
Yep.
And then we under-index on how fast it'll go when it actually starts moving. And I've seen that movie and 2 sequels in my career, and we've been early with technology, thinking that it's going to happen. And I think we're at the place at AR right now where people were very excited. We were excited about this. Started 8 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And now it's at the point where it's beginning to go mainstream, and I think now it's where we risk not ramping up fast enough, because I think it's going to start really being deployed much more quickly for enterprise applications and in the consumer space also.
Interesting. The one of the parts about the announcement that you guys made here was about model targets.
Yeah.
And essentially sort of the high level concept of sort of turning the sort of physical world digital and sort of any physical object. That's a pretty advanced concept, but one that we've thought about for a long time and sort of the core of augmented reality, mixed reality, XR as well. So talk to me about how is that technology really going to help average people? We talked about this sort of scenario, but I'm asking about sort of the next step beyond sort of circling objects in Project Chalk to one where we actually can recognize objects. They're tagged, we can search them, we get information about them.
Yeah.
Talk about that, and I'm really sort of curious about how you guys are sort of leading the path on that.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to probably understand is a little bit about object recognition for AR, because there's a lot of different ways to do object recognition, and people are talking about a lot of different things, and there's different ways to do it that enable a different class of experience. So, when you recognize an object and you want to use it for AR, you want to know exactly where that object is relative to your device. Whether it's on your head, to your head, or
Sure.
your camera. But I need to know, when you hear 6 degrees of freedom, that means where it is in space, X, Y, Z, and then pitch, yaw, and roll. Where is it?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that you need to know is sort of its geometric boundaries. Like, I want to know exactly where the edges are. And why is that important? Well, if I want to do some fun gaming stuff and I want to shoot that thing with a virtual can of spray paint or pour syrup into it, I want it to drip down the edges.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's an instructional or industrial use case, this cup might have some screws on it, and I want to put arrows to very particular screws to be able to screw them. And so that type of object recognition is what we have been focused on with Euphoria, and we've come up with a bunch of different ways to do that. Now, the challenge is that type of object recognition you can't do with every object under the sun, because you have
Right.
a lot of them that have challenges with reflection, see-through, and that stuff is well-known problems.
Organic objects too, right? So-
Organic ones are really, really a challenge. So that's what we've been focused on. That's a capability that you would expect would come into something like Project Chalk. So it's not just about having somebody else write or draw things all the time. It's about recognizing things too, and that's the type of object recognition that would be used in
For-
that kind of scenario.
For some businesses that are physical in nature, they have
Yeah.
equipment, maintenance, factories, distributions. Do you think that sort of the business itself will be digitized one day? Do you think there'll be digital twins of all of these objects, and a business will sort of operate virtually? And what are the trigger points that we should watch for sort of between now and when maybe we'll get to that point?
Yeah, I think the digital twin will happen. Yeah, if you saw Jim Heppelman's talk this morning talking about the digital twin,
Okay.
yeah, I absolutely believe that'll happen. I think that we have a lot of challenges in realizing the full digital twin equation. One of those is connectivity, of course, getting
Sure.
everything connected. And there's work to do on the content pipeline to get content adapted. One of the things that Jim showed today was taking, for example, that instructional content for for that service procedure and being able to break that
Yeah.
up into pieces. It's challenging stuff to solve.
Yeah.
So the pieces are being worked on and absolutely attainable.
Hey, back over to Tony. So we got a long history. VR is coming a long way. You could say sort of VR is coming of age, right? It had a bit of a winter, the first winter of VR. That implies maybe there'll be a second, or maybe there's something that's going on right now. But I'm sort of wondering about your view or Unity's view of the maturity of VR, how it's being used to power experiences today, maybe comment about how effective they are, especially in entertainment, and talk a little bit about the future of the game engine, or sort of the engine concept, and how it's going to sort of take VR to the next level.
So do we want to tackle this from a market standpoint then? Is that where you want to get started,
Well,
like in Unity's point of view on that?
My question, and I didn't maybe phrase it right, is more about experience, right? So today we have gaming experiences, and they're, I think they're quite good because, well, games are 3D in nature, and the game developers do quite a good job. But outside of games, there's not a lot of expertise. And so how is VR is coming of age in sort of one aspect, but how is the game engine and rendering technology going to power the future of VR?
Got it. Well, yeah, I think it's even arguable. There's a lot of people who are, especially inside Unity, who are very much focused on game dev, and they look at VR or AR and some of the lower resolution aspects of some of those platforms, because we're still upping resolution all there, and there's even some internal skeptics about that, just in terms of production value right now. I'm not one of those people. I'm much more on the hopeful side, where it's
Sure.
well, of course, these things are going to get higher res, and the production value is going to crank up, and we're just going to keep making the engine better. We're going to keep this thing at 90 hertz on the desktop platforms and 60 on the mobile platforms. So I think I'm with you on that. I think gaming's sort of sorted, and we know how to do that well, though we have specific design challenges in VR. But I get really excited about things like Tilt Brush. Historically, I'm not a gamer, right? So I think more about visualization. I think about what artists can do, given a creative palette. And so you look at something like Tilt Brush, and especially now, because they also have a Unity SDK that they announced a while back, where you can actually take the art you've made and bring it into an interactive Unity app.
Oh,
You
nice.
can actually use Tilt Brush as an art creation tool for game dev or experience dev. That's pretty awesome. So it's not just about making wondrous XR masterpieces that stand alone. You can create whole environments with that. I think that's going to give game dev in XR a really big boost. And then it's also, then I think also just the new capabilities of VR and content creation that platforms like Unity continue to just level up on by enabling more artists to get in, by doing other new features, integrating environment capture and other things in a mixed reality setting. I think that's going to be game on. So I'm super hopeful, but it's very much early days.
Sure.
Right? I mean, I personally think things like Tilt Brush are the glimmer of a killer app. When people start talking about that, but killer apps are always these things you only see in the rearview mirror, right? So we don't know yet. But I think that's where that's headed. I forgot I lost the thread, so don't mind
No, that's
me. I
fine.
was rambling.
But my follow-up, no, that was a perfect answer. My follow-up is also, okay, you talked a bit about VR, how it's going to advance, and how you guys are thinking about it. Augmented reality is not a topic. It hasn't been a topic at Unity, almost until really when you showed up. Can you talk a little bit about the company plans, sort of how you're thinking about the company's products and being used in mixed reality setting?
Okay, so first, I'll probably challenge that. I mean, maybe that's the public perception, and maybe we need to change that a little bit.
Okay, well, tell us how
the
it
fact of the
is.
matter is, this is, and I wasn't going to go there, but people don't know it. Pokemon Go was built in Unity, and I think that's clearly an augmented reality app that's gotten some attention. I think the partnership we forged with Euphoria now, and this predates me, so I'm not sure how long it's been in the works, but we've been working on this for a while.
2010.
Thank you. So,
Oh, wow.
so clear
Okay.
clear evidence that we've been interested in this space for a while.
But the interest is a lot more serious now. I mean, it seems like they got you there, so.
Well, that's across immersive tech, so fair enough. But I mean, I think the thing is when you just compare, say, AR to VR, it's simply a matter of blocking and tackling. A lot of these technologies in AR, well, mixed reality with the headset-based stuff are tracking a little bit behind a headset-based VR right now.
Sure.
Because of cost, form factors, and some other things at the moment. But what we're seeing now is phone-based augmented reality is coming in so hot, it's unbelievable. Not just the amazing breakthroughs that companies like Vuforia have made on the software side, just using today's smartphone, but also the emphasis we're seeing from Facebook and Google and some big folks just saying, we're going to use the camera for this stuff now. Just the thing we got in our pocket now. Then right on the heels of that, what are we seeing? We're seeing the first Tango-enabled phones about to come to market. This is so exciting. The Asus, Lenovo phones, whatever else is going to come around that they were showing at Google I/O, mind-blowing for me. That was a big aha moment for me that this is it's going to be in everyone's pockets, probably quicker than it's going to be on everyone's face, but that's even a race too. So all these form factors are coming into play. And then you combine that with the fact that there are arguably broader use cases for augmented reality. We can actually go there a little bit too. And there's a lot of industrial use cases for VR in terms of simulation and training, visualizing things that don't actually exist where AR doesn't help, like a building that hasn't been built yet. But you could overlay that with AR, by the way, on an empty space. We just did that with the Golden State Warriors for their groundbreaking, where you saw a holographic version of the stadium on the build site before it was built. That was
nice.
really cool. But in general, AR's industrial use cases seem a lot more obvious and broad. And so all of that, when you mix that all up and look at it, Unity is extremely interested in all of that. Mm-hmm. And this has just been a matter, I think, of timing and some of the stuff we've talked about in the past. And if you go back to our Vision Summit, I think you'd have to say that AR and MR were as equally represented in VR and the content tracks and the keynote and all that. So I think it's mostly perception. I think the reality is quite a bit different. We're on AR big time.
Sounds good. Hey, the title of the session sort of was a veiled reference to the Gartner hype cycle, and that AR, VR, MR is sort of going on to the plateau. It actually should have been onto the plateau. It set the slope. So the Gartner hype cycle is this kind of weird-looking curve, and we track technologies. We put a dot on the cycle, and it starts off at this trigger of innovation. There's the peak of the hype, and there's this trough of disillusionment. Excuse me. And finally, there's this plateau of productivity. I help author, or if not author, the technology dots for AR, VR, and others that are related. We have them sort of either just going into the trough or just coming out, so to speak, right? They've sort of said the hype is past. Some of that was years ago, and now today there's enough technology that we can sort of quickly accelerate to commoditization. So my question for both of you, and I'll start with Jay, is let's talk about the hardware a little bit. Both you guys are software companies. We're realizing that these technologies are getting mature. I know both of you talked privately to the hardware guys. In a public forum, if they were sitting here in the audience, what would you tell them that they need to do to help you guys be successful in your software efforts? And start with Jay.
I gotta tell you, I was so disillusioned 2 years ago. It's right
Disillusioned
there.
2 years ago.
Yeah, I was right there at the bottom of that trough.
You were?
Yeah, they were climbing out.
We're climbing out. That's good because, well, my daughter's climbing out. That's good. I'm just about to publish a new one, and they'll be climbing.
Look, there's when it comes to the devices on your head, I think the problems are pretty well known, and the device manufacturers and component suppliers are all on the right trajectories to make the right things happen. I don't want to talk about one specific one or
No, I was more asking you general comment on technology. If they were sitting here, hey, we need more resolution, we need better optics, where do you think the improvements in hardware are going to help your customers?
So there's a few things. There's the optics side of things, and at the end of the day, Brian, we our approach in technology enablement is to look at the experience and one particular experience as possible. So the answer to that question for an enterprise use for something that might be step-by-step instructions is very different than if a device manufacturer is trying to do a first-person shooter on their head, like dramatically different. But the categories fall into the optics and displays. That's one. The other is the interactions, and then the other is the whole series of compute problems right now, where current generations of silicon, as you know, blow away thermal limits on current processors for the amount of compute we need to do the fun stuff. And so those are kind of the bodies of work. I think algorithmically, the technology we need software-wise to make all this happen, we understand that pretty well. As you guys found from your early careers and mine, like the software guys can figure out the right software architecture like 100 years before the hardware is there.
Sure.
Maybe not 100 years. But
we're not that old.
But long before. And I think there's no exception here. The software stacks that I think we need for these things, we know what they could and should look like probably on the device and on the cloud. And it's a matter of hardware technologies converging in a form that enable different types of experiences for the stuff on your head. And obviously the ones that are starting first there are enterprise, because they will bear a higher price for a lower fidelity experience.
Businesses pay more for less, but they want to do it because it's going to create some efficiency.
There's an ROI.
Yep, it is. They're going to spend on what they can make money from, right? In an incremental way, it certainly seems like. Do you have any ideas on hardware, Tony?
Yeah, well, and I do agree with what Jay said about the specificity around use cases or industries, but that being said, I think there's one common element for the headset makers, which is get rid of the wires.
Get rid of the wires.
Yeah, it breaks immersion in the entertainment experiences. It's really cumbersome in industrial settings. So either it's get the wire to a little belt pack version of this, or just figure out whatever the next Wi-Fi is that's going to make this thing work, so that you can actually have a low latency experience that's talking to a brain somewhere else. Either that, or make this stuff so damn light you don't need another computer, right? It's so small and so light. Where Microsoft's headed with HoloLens, but get it even smaller and lighter. So it's a little bit related to form factors as well. But however you can do it, get people on the move, because as long as we've got that snaky cable, we're not really going to get to this thing's true potential.
Now let's talk about hardware that's not on your head, smartphone-based immersive technology, smartphone augmented reality, or XR, if you will. There's been a lot of talk about that. Certainly, Google Project Tango has got some really interesting technology behind it and what they're doing. I've personally seen different devices that have 3D sensors on them, and there's even some on the show floor you can buy and stick onto your tablet or stick onto your smartphone. There's this notion that mobile devices with a flat screen are not as powerful, even though they're cloud connected. But Pokemon Go certainly changed our minds about what our people are willing to do with their smartphones. Talk to me a little bit about what you think of this sort of future of smartphone augmented reality or smartphone immersive reality. Do you think it's a real promise? Do you think that's the winning device? Is it going to come before or after headsets are popular? I'm just sort of interested in your opinion on where you see smartphone augmented reality sort of fitting into the overall technology stack.
I think, Jay, you got to take this one first.
Jay?
We've been
All
living, breathing this for a while now. So, no,
Yeah,
go for
I
it.
think
Jump in.
the biggest technology shift that's going to drive better AR on smartphones is the move from just traditional 2D monocular cameras to stuff that can do depth sensing technologies. We got very excited in 2014 about a company called PrimeSense that had a sensor, and we showed a really cool gaming example, putting one of those things onto the back of a tablet and game elements running all over the place. And Apple bought the company like
Yep.
4 months later, and it was sad. And like set our efforts back like I don't know, like a year and a half. So
Okay.
thankfully, Johnny was working on Tango, and so we got in, and there was another solution on Tango. But that's the kind of technology that'll make it much more immersive, and I think we're starting to see that in Tango. There's other approaches to depth sensing that make it more immersive, and that's coming. That's
Yep.
coming.
Do you think, I've had this sort of question in my mind, working on my next forecast for head-mounted displays and some other devices. An open question, and this is sort of how I do my research, and I'm going to ask them live here on stage. Will the popularization of smartphone augmented reality cannibalize or in some way take away from headset technology?
I don't think it's going to cannibalize because headset technology, there's nothing to cannibalize yet. It's not deployed in vast numbers, right?
Well-
So do you think, are you asking would it slow down adoption potentially of headset technology? I don't think so because with
Yeah,
a
more
headset,
slowdown.
you really can get the stuff around you,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can be immersed in the information in a way that with a phone, you're still having to do this magic window type of operation, right? Nothing wrong with the magic window because again, you're using the hardware that's in everybody's pocket already, right? So I think I look at those as a continuum, and I look at those as phone-based AR is what is going to get AR into everybody's hands, to the point that then we're going to see when the form factors are right, when the wires are gone, when it looks like the glasses on your head are better, then we're going to see an explosion of that kind of adoption of hardware. But
Okay.
you're not going to have that unless you have people doing a lot of AR-y stuff that they're doing in today's Vuforia and Unity apps.
Look, I think it's quite the contrary. I mean, the stuff here is going to accelerate the
Yeah.
stuff here. The more, and this is the data we've seen, is the more people, especially in enterprise, experience this stuff and see what's possible, go, oh my God, it's so freaking cool, put it on my head.
Okay.
And it's going to be, I think, the same thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely increasing people's appetite for 3D content.
So I think I know how to change my forecast then. Maybe it'll accelerate adoption. So
I think it will.
We'll see.
I think it will.
Hey, I got to ask both of
Well
you.
done.
Got both of you the same question here. Different topic. So you guys get around a lot. I do too. And I've seen a lot of very, very cool demos over the past year or two. Pick out one that you think was one of the coolest things that you've seen or coolest immersive experiences that you had. And you can pick anything on any type of device.
We
Either
have
way.
to pick favorite children at that point.
Yeah,
right?
you have to pick one.
Oh, no.
And I'm going to tell mine too at the end. So don't worry, I got mine. So.
I'm afraid. I've seen so much good stuff. I don't know. I can't pick a favorite.
Well, you
Can I
mentioned.
pick one and not call it a favorite?
No, you don't have to. I said cool. You didn't say, well, no
I can't even
favorite. How
call it
about
the
one of the
coolest.
coolest?
Come
One
on.
of the coolest you've seen lately. How's that?
Well, I mean, you heard my opinion on tilt brush already, right? I'm a big fan.
Sure,
Yeah.
tilt brush, but anything else? You're going to get passed by if you don't answer.
I'm okay zipping my
Listen, I'm running out of time. I got more questions. You got to answer something.
You gonna
Jay?
go out on a limb, Jay?
There hasn't been a lot of new stuff, in the last few years. I think a lot of the
Okay.
use cases and things have been similar, but there's a class that's interesting to me, which is kind of at this intersection of AR and VR, where people are doing AR on like a VR device, like with the Merge VR guys are
Sure.
doing with like that HoloCube.
The merge cube, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really neat idea.
All right, I'm going to answer my own question.
I see how this is going.
Yeah. He set that up.
I did not. I will tell you, I asked them both this question a week ago, and they should have had an answer. Sorry. Listen, there's totally cool stuff that's going on. And I'm going to give you, actually, Tony and I talked about Tilt Brush, and I have to agree, if there's one of the killerest apps today is Tilt Brush. I use it a lot. I love it. It's when I first tried it, I was like, wow, this is...
That's an aha.
It's totally an aha.
That's an aha.
It is, so I really agree with Tony on that. There's one, though, that I'll mention. I visited Australia last year, and I checked out this company called Zero Latency. So Zero Latency is walk-around VR. So essentially, you put on your VR headset, you have a backpack that's a laptop computer, and you walk around in a space that's essentially 20 meters by about 50 meters or something like this. It's big in a big warehouse, and you're playing a game. It's a zombie shooter. That's what they had last year. But the act of walking and the act of the continuous walking, and even though they were doing some directional walking for me, right? But the act of walking and running around and being my own person was really changed my view, right, of how good it can get. Now, it was a rudimentary game, and there was kinds of issues with it, but you could see making it hyper-personal, I think, is really interesting.
I did one of those, and I was very worried about running into a wall. Very worried. And they let me run into a wall.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And then
Now,
what?
they did it on purpose so you would learn your lesson? Or
I don't know what the motivation was, but I'm horrified. Were you not afraid to run into a wall?
You know, I was in the beginning, but, you know, I wanted to give it the full experience, right? So I sort of got rid of the bias, and I was there with someone who had never done VR before.
Yeah.
And I just kind of I went in and did it, right? So, and I was just like, okay, let me do it.
Yeah.
There is a safety mechanism that they built into the Zero Latency app.
Yeah.
It's very loud, and you can't ignore it. It stops you. So I couldn't actually run into the walls. I mean, I guess I could have if I really tried. But no, I just went with it. I was running around. Typically, when I do a demo, I try to break it to see the fallacies that are there. And I was so taken back by the fact that I could walk around. I kind of forgot about all that.
Yeah, and that's like back to getting rid of the wires, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
you have a desktop-powered computer, so you can have the full immersive VR experience, but you can move around. Now, when I tried my first one of those. It was like an HP laptop that weighed like 12 pounds, and I was doing Fruit Ninja in it, and I threw my back out and had sciatica for like a week. But those computers have all gotten really small now, and I've done them more recently, and it was like, it's dope. I mean, it's just really great when you can have a backpack computer. It's light enough, you don't notice it on there.
Yeah.
And I agree 100%. Being able to move around like that is just a fantastic experience.
Hey, something else from our history, the web, Vermal. You know, today there's been a lot of advancement, some announcements around browsers that are supporting Web 3D. You know, just give us a little color about the web, and then, you know, maybe we'll talk about the opposite, like maybe why the web isn't great, why it is. So just sort of curious from your perspective, what's going on with web and VR and immersive today?
So if you think about the web in the early days of the web, and if you think about what would have happened if people were going to connect online and get their news by downloading a PDF every day, the web would have never taken off. Mm-hmm. With the web, you have a medium for instant communication. There's like zero friction. There's none of this, I have to go through and figure out what I want to install to decide whether I'm going to go use it. There's a major commitment there. And when you look at what it takes to get discovered and then get through the process in an app store, outside of gaming is clearly working well in app stores, right?
Yep.
The idea of getting apps to, say, shop, unless maybe it's an Amazon app, or getting apps to browse things casually, or getting apps to get advertised to, that's never going to happen. Nobody downloads an app to see ads. That just doesn't work that way, right? So if you look at the web, it enables all these kind of use cases. And if you play that into immersive VR and AR types of content, there are going to be use cases that are much better served by the instant ability to see them and experience them, powered by WebGL, powered by WebVR and WebAR coming, which are all being enabled in all the people who are making browsers now. Initially on mobile, interestingly, it's Daydream and Oculus for gear that are pushing really hard. Like if you look at that, you're going to see a lot of use cases that you would not have seen in an app store, right? And so I think that's where the power of the web comes in. And you're never going to get AAA content that way. Browsers aren't built to deliver that kind of content. They're not built to deliver really long-form, long-playing content, with the exception of maybe video, and even that, you know, most people don't do that, right? They do YouTube, they do short form stuff. So for the short form, casual, snackable size VR content for a lot of these use cases, I think the web is where it's going to go, for sure.
But the main argument so far has been about performance. And maybe, Jay, I don't know if you have any comment on that. You guys have really been working hard on native technology, natively compiled apps, right? So maybe talk about the advantages that you have with that and why the web works or doesn't.
Look at conceptually, the web makes all the sense in the world. It'd be awesome if we were doing AR on the web. And we did a lot of work on it at Qualcomm. We had our own browser engine. We're doing improvements and optimizations for WebKit on Snapdragon at that time. And we did all kinds of cool stuff with Vuforia there to tightly integrate it. Like, AR should be there. Let's use CSS 3D and just make it happen. The challenge is, to really realize the promise of the web, it's got to work everywhere on all classes of devices. And we could do that on Android. We had some issues doing that on other platforms. So I think it's about getting it in browsers everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you look at how HTML5 actually how long it took to penetrate on mobile and be good and catch up with a lot of native services, that took a while as well. So that's a counterpoint there for you.
Listen, I was just
We're being
informed we're
kicked off.
out of time. So that's it. I want to thank Tony and Jay for being here, answering all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.